Yo, what's poppin'? So we have the APAC kickoff clash matches. There were two of them, and the first one being the fourth seed Philadelphia Fusion with a 3-3 record at +2 map differential against the first seed Hangzhou Spark 5 with +8. Hangzhou did pick Philly over Seoul for this matchup, and the score was not 3-2 Spark like I predicted. It was actually 3-1 for Philly. So Oasis, 2-0 victory for Philly. Philly playing PHI-HZS, Belosria, Fixa, AimGod, Spark playing Shy, Alpha Yi, Gushway, Irony, and Super Rich. This was Spark's pick because they were the higher seed, so they decided to go Oasis. Philly just 2-0 them. So City Center's a 100-91 victory for Philly. Spark started out in the lead. Super Rich is getting some frags. But eventually they take initiative and they try to dive into Philly spawn, but they don't find a lot, and they invest in Nano, so they don't get any value off of it. And then Philly kind of comes back. There's a time where Carpe tried to flank, but he just sprinted into the Spark backline, but it didn't matter because that's kind of popped off and built him out. And then Philly basically play aggressive and kind of push into the Spark spawn and stagger at the clock. And eventually they win that off that just by playing aggressive and kind of pressure, not letting Spark really group up and just shutting them out early. Moving on to Gardens, is a 100-17 victory for Philly. Both teams playing Soldier, Genji, Winston, Lucio, Ana. Super Rich immediately booped Belosria off the map. Fixa is still beating early, but it's working whenever Philly can get very aggressive and like kills off it. There's a time where Spark have the ult advantage, but Alpha E goes down early, and a lot of ults get traded, and eventually Spark win, but it didn't look good. And Alpha E overall on this map, it didn't have a really good map. We've seen this last time they played too. He didn't have a good start to the series, and it kind of turns out again. Anyway, very, very Spark almost flipped and the last fight, but it doesn't really work. So kind of a weak map for Spark overall. They had a decent lead in the first round, unable to hold out. The second round, not in control the whole time. Super Rich is playing well, so that's good for him. But other than that, not a lot from Spark. And AimGod, I felt like he wasn't really getting. There's no pressure on him, and he kind of just sit back and do what he wanted. I feel he just looked I say a little better in here, but really looked much better on the Winston comps, I would say. That's who's getting more done than Alpha E for sure. Bailing out some bad decisions. Maybe Carpe hits a flank he shouldn't. Doesn't matter because this is able to pop off. And Fix is playing well. Even though that Super Rich had that individual that play on Belosria where he had this 600 HP advantage on his ult charge. Fixa still had the same ult percentage, so he's playing well. And yeah, so Philly just looked better on the Winston comp, and that's going to continue this entire series. Moving on to Midtown, it is Spark's pick. 2-1 victory for Spark. MN3 comes in for Carpe, Bernard comes in for Gushway. On Philly's offense, they play Soldier, Sim, Ryan, Lucio, Bap, a little bit of maybe a London inspiration. And Spark playing Soldier, Torbjorn, Zarya on a Brig. Philly immediately, they TP over to the house high ground, and then they set up there, and then Shy kind of tries to hit a flank on them, but goes up to where in that train area. I just said 15 times, but whatever. And then they just go back, and they run on the Shy, and then they TP back over the other one. But Alpha E kills legit 5. It's a pretty good play. Maybe this perked him up, got him back into the game a little bit. Philly do the same TP. They get 40% off it, but AimGod windows in the window, and Spark just kite back. It does give Philly some ult percentage. Bernard comes in, and Alpha E comes in with their ults, and they clean up. Except they don't clean up, because Philly actually kite back into the house, and instead of pushing it, Spark just kind of let it happen, and then the regroup happens. It doesn't really work. So if Spark pushes that backline a little bit more, push their advantage, and clean them up, force them out completely, they don't end up turning it. But Belosria kind of win in the end, and Philly takes A. At this point, Zest swaps over to May, and this is where you see the Reinhardt comp start to slow down a little bit on that second point. Uh, Much better like tempo from Spark at this point. They're playing the Zarya comp well into it, and the Reinhardt comp is struggling to get onto the high ground and really contest them in any way. Spark's just really going over the Reinhardt even. Moving on to the offense. Philly playing Soldier, May, Ryan, Lucio, Bap. Is that true? I don't think that was true. I don't think I did this. I don't think they were on Ryan. Oh, he was on Ryan actually. I lied. My bad. Bernard swaps over to Winston at this point. Alpha E ends up getting a pick. And Aim God dies and Philly can regroup. And they come back. Alpha E is just pummeling at this point on the Genji. He's playing very well. And yeah, Sparks just kind of roll on to B, and they end up just kind of rolling to win too. Alpha E very clean. He hits a Nano Blade, and his ammo comes out, but he kills it before the dash comes out, and it's very clean play. And Spark looked better. Spark looked like the better team on this map, especially on the second point. But they're taking the initiative. They seem to have the answer to whatever Philly's doing, and it looked like they knew what to expect and how to counteract it, which is exactly what we expect from, well, I expected from Spark at this point. And I'd say they look pretty much dominant overall. I like Philly playing the Rhyme. I like the TP on first, but on second, I don't think it's some play. Maybe just swap over to Winston. For first point, maybe it's a good answer. They're definitely good at getting the point, but not the answer for second for sure. Moving over to Watch Punch Gibraltar, it's a 3 over Philly. Gushue comes in for Bernard because of course he has to. And on Philly's offense, both teams playing the Widow, Genji, Winston, Brigana. And for Philly, this offense is pretty much a roll. They end up capping with 205 in the end. Spoiler, but right off the bat, Aim God hits a nade on Super Rich and he just insta-died, like immediately, less than 5 seconds in. And it lets Philly set up on the high ground. And it looks like they're going to do things, but Shy ended up hitting a pick on Aim God. So Spark ended up regaining control, but after that, it is all Philly all day, basically. MN3 picks Shy, Philly take the space off it. Zest is playing good, and Sparker just they just get steamrolled, and it's like they're not getting time to set up. There's no engagements, and they're getting pushed in. Really, like it's just not great. Alpha E is not doing that much. It's like they're trying to counter Philly by like ignoring them and like trying to probably out frag them, but it's just not happening. And Philly just know how to set up the dives in this composition much better. And MN3 is kind of free because it's how much pressure is being put on the Shy, I think. It's not like MN3's like winning duels. I just feel like Shy isn't getting to take the duels at all, other than the first point. I move over to the Spark offense. Very sad. Both teams running Widow, Genji, Winston, Brigana, and it just feels like Spark don't know how to coordinate their dives proper. There's a great example of this is when Alpha E basically solo dives onto the server room backline with a Nanoblade, and he ends up forcing Aim God down the stairs onto the low ground, and Gooseway can clean it up. But if he walks up to the high ground, he gets nothing for it. There's just no answer. And if it feels like this whole like they're just winning on this particular comp, they're trying to win off of maybe Alpha E or Shy hitting shots or something, but that's not really how the comp can operate at a high level. It's giving Washington Justice vibes, honestly, instead of a Tracer trying to do everything, they're putting it onto Alpha E or Shy, and that's just not going to work in the top 4 of APAC in this tournament. It just won't happen. So definitely the weakest Winston team, but also I think the strongest Zarya team. So Spark's in a really weird area where I think they need to force the Zarya comp as much as they can. And it's not like Gushue looks awful, but I feel like it's a compositional problem. It's not just on Gushue. Constantly getting out tempoed, and it feels like they don't have the same fight expectations and the same fight planning as they do on the Zarya comp to me. Moving on to New Queen Street, it's a 3-0 for Philly. That doesn't make any sense. That's not how New Queen Street works. Hold on. There, it's a 57.19 to 57.18 for Philly. It was a very close map. Carpet comes from MN3 and Bernard comes from Gushue. Spark had the advantage early in this match. They get the checkpoint first, and they're looking strong. And this is where their composition thrives. Once they have the lead, especially, their rotation should be stronger, and it should be harder for Philly to really get any traction and push. But it comes to the overtime, which is where it really matters. They're hanging around in the middle. There's some good grabs. There's good gameplay from both teams. It's a pretty even match. But in the overtime, Spark is up with Grav and with Blossom against a Nano Boost, and they're coming up on Visor a little bit. But they go too fast, I think. It's like 30 seconds left, and they just get the checkpoint. They don't get an inch further, right? They're at the checkpoint. Bernard grabs a Nano Carpe, and Alpha Yi shoots him, but he runs out of ammo, and then he blossoms him. And then Philly just win because they just committed their 2 ults to kill one dude. It was just a complete misplay of how their ultimates were supposed to work, and it's probably the worst blunder that Spark have done on the Zarya comp the entire season. It was just not good, and I don't see the vision. There were probably so many options. You can play safer. You can wait the time a little bit. You're not worried about what are you worried about? A Nano Monkey maybe. You can just grabbing him would be more effective. You could flank with Shy maybe, find something there, but it was just probably the worst play they could make other than doing nothing. They just toss their win con ults out, and they end up losing the map off it. That's what the map comes down to, and that's how they're supposed to win. That's how this comp operates. Is you have to win with your ult cycle, and they don't do it, and they lose the series off it. Anyway, summary of the series: Philly outclassing Spark on the Winston comps. Spark looking better on the Zarya comps, but they just fumbled that bag on New Queen Street. Kind of just makes them look and make them look pretty bad, to be honest. They should have been an unlosable fight. Thompson player of the match going to go to Zest. He was doing so much all the time. He was turning unwinnable fights into winnable fights and making up for bad decisions from some of his teammates. Like maybe Carpe had a bad flank, he'd make up for that. Fixa has a bad beat, he'd capitalize on it. So just really good play from Zest and still looking like my Rookie of the Year candidate. Alpha E not having the same impact as Zest, and that's not really what it comes down to, but not a great showing for the Spark. And moving on to the Seoul Dynasty, the third seed Seoul Dynasty with 4-2 at a +6 map differential against the second seed Shanghai Dragons, who are 5-1 with a +4 map differential, ends up being a 3-2 win for Shanghai, the exact same as it was last weekend. Oasis 2-0 victory for Shanghai. They're looking pretty good. Seoul playing Profit Fit, Smurf, Creative, and Dame. No changes there. And Shanghai playing Lip, Who Are You, Fate, Li Jaegon, and Izayaki. On Gardens, a 100-99 victory for Shanghai. Seoul playing Genji, Soldier, Winston on Lucio. Shanghai playing the same comp. And the thing about Shanghai is Fate actually had a pretty bad match, in my opinion. He ends up going deep and dying often very early. He does it 2 fights in a row on Gardens. Shanghai are down to a 2-fight disadvantage right away. Just not what you want to see from your main tank, from your only tank. Who Are You is a different profit, but Shanghai end up coming. Oh yeah, Who Are You is different profit mostly, but Seoul do have ult advantage coming through. Profit dies early. He dies early a lot actually. Who Are You finds fits and Solar resetting again, and Solar being forced to reset a lot, but yeah. There's a time where Li Jaegon beat gets cut by the bubble, and Smurf does a really good play, stops them getting any value, and they win the fight off of it. But they also have the commit analyzer. But in the end, it's Shanghai just being clutch, end up turning the fight in overtime, and they win the map. Despite that sick play from Smurf. Moving on to University, it's a 100-80 victory for Shanghai. Both teams still playing the same compositions. Jaegon immediately dies right away, right? But Smurf kind of chases Fate, and he ends up dying, and Lip gets them. Who Are You has a really good showing on this map. And there's a thing that Lip does that's very impactful, in my opinion. Whenever he gets nanoed, he doesn't up to visor most of the time, and he just relies on his aim, which really helps their ult economy because then you use visor and you get the same you use nano and you get the same value as using a nano visor, but then you still have visor. It's actually crazy, and more teams, the good teams, should probably start doing this more if you trust your hit scans aim. Um, Overall, Shanghai looking dominant. Fate is feeding though, not dominant. It's close. It's not like a domination, but they're looking like the better team here. And Fate is feeding, but like sometimes he's feeding, but sometimes he either looks really bad or he looks really good. It's like he doesn't quite know his limits perfectly, but he's learning them. Uh, Overall, very solid gameplay from Shanghai. Great ult usage. Who are used playing very well, finding kills and winning fights from Oxygen. And Lip is just being the best. Lip looks so good in this first map. Just a complete master class on this map, and it's pretty impressive. Seoul are looking good too, right? But Shanghai are just looking that much better. And Fitz is getting outclassed, in my opinion here. So yeah, and other than that insane play where Smurf cut Lee Gun's bubble, it's been all right. There's been some good primals, but yeah, it's been good. Moving on to Midtown, 2-1 victory for Seoul. This is a very interesting map. Um, no substitutions. I was eating on the Seoul offense, not gonna lie. But Lip was going crazy. He had 8 and 11 final blows, and he had over 11k damage per 10. And Lip was just going insane. But Shanghai do stop them at the end of seconds, so it's not like a great hold. It's a solid hold, but it's not like start of second or first hold. You know what I mean? But Lip looking very good, and Shanghai looking pretty good on this defense. However, on the offense, this was a very close map actually. Very close. Could have went either way. So right away on the offense, Izayaki finds Profit, and Shanghai gets like 55% off it, but Seoul come back and they force Shanghai back. Um, and then Profit finds Izayaki again, and then Shanghai has to reset. But then Profit dies again. So you see Profit getting picked out 2 out of 3 times early in these fights. The Fate goes a little too deep with Primal, and Shanghai don't beat. Like they have like 5 ults. If Fate goes too deep, and they maybe could have saved him with a nano boost or a beat or something, but they choose not to, and they come back next fight with 4 ultimates and they actually get no kills off of them. However, Lip and Hui you end up clutching out whenever both main tanks are off the field. So basically a DPS diff, but using all those ults and not finding kills, it was looking very dicey for a bit. Shanghai quickly gains control of that overpass, and Lip Nanovisor wins in another fight, and it's looking like they'll probably just roll. Prophet dies late, and it looks pretty bad for Seoul, but a crazy play by Vendame. He beats, and then he punches Lee Jae-gon in the jaw, and he Ajaxes him. And it's like, because of how long it took for them to beat first, it was like an overtime. It was very close to it. They don't have a lot of time here, despite winning their first fight on B. So it kind of forces Shanghai back. And now it's overtime, and Fate swaps over to the ball, but it's not enough. Who are you played doesn't get anything, and Shanghai end up dying, and Seoul wins. So basically, that one play from Vendame, Ajax, and Lee Jae-gon, just beating and then doing as much damage as he could to him was crazy, and it ends up resulting in Seoul's win. But yeah, so because of Shanghai's struggle on A, it got them into trouble on B. They didn't have enough time to do it, and Fate was not having a good map from what I saw on the offense. There was a lot of problems with him on A. He was going too deep. He was trying to do too much, maybe, and just making poor dives. But Lip and Hui you were looking fantastic. This was not on them. And Prophet is having an interesting series. It feels like the play is there, but he's getting caught out a little bit, and maybe Shanghai's watching for him particularly, and there's just no room for him to mess up. He has to play pretty perfectly to get a lot of value. But yeah, it looked like Shanghai's map until Vendame hit that Ajax. Moving on to Route 66, this was a absolute disaster for Shanghai in a lot of ways. So it's a 3-1 victory for Seoul, no substitutions. On Seoul's offense, they have running Genji, Soldier, Winston on the Lucio. That's what Shanghai's running. And Seoul kind of roll through A and enter B with 445, and they don't use any ults. And then they use these ults. They have 5 ults. They just get through B with those ults. And then they enter C with 430. So just a quick speed run there. But Shanghai finally stops the steamroll, and they hold on the C point for a long time actually. Why is this angle like that? Whatever. Um, so yeah, who are you finds four with blades, and Shanghai finally stopped the steamroll, but they hold on this C point for the entire duration until overtime. Uh, and there's like two fights in a row where it looks like they're just going to lose, but then they live long enough for the spawns to come back, and they're doing classic Shanghai things where they aren't truly, it's not truly over until it is over. You cannot count them out at any moment. Uh, their alt rotation comes back, and despite Soul trying to build up alts and take them and win like that, right? Uh, Soul can only cap in overtime despite having such a great time bank. It's just standard Shanghai gameplay. They get rolled in and they just stop it. It's like what happened before doesn't even matter to them. They're put in a scenario like fresh. Moving over to their offense, it was not good. It was really bad. Fate is barely living any engagement he's taking or dying. Smurf is going crazy. He's getting big primals. And Shanghai make it through eventually in overtime, but the fights are very scrappy. And Seoul kind of wins them, but they end up uh, giving the point away basically. But Seoul kind of hold Shanghai at the beginning thing, and they don't get it very far. Shanghai don't trigger overtime even, so we don't even get an overtime push of the clutch Shanghai Dragons. So very turbulent map for Shanghai. They looked not good. It's kind of looking like they were whenever they went like to 5 maps against the Charge and they had to pull off reverse sweeps, or 5 against Valiant. Kind of looking like those maps where they're just not there fully. And there's that one time they were there on C, but other than that, it just they weren't there. I don't know how it happens. Maybe they I there's no explanation. There's no explanation for the Shanghai Dragons. Uh, if they hit that overtime, maybe they still win. I don't think so because they were out ulted by Shanghai. You can never count them out if they get that overtime. Maybe they do win. But moving over to New Queen Street, I was getting food for this, so I didn't actually see it until like the final 2 minutes. Not gonna lie, but Soul was in the lead for most of the map from what I can see. Fleta comes over Huyu and Void comes over Fate, by the way. So Soul playing the Tracer, Soldier, Winston, Ana, Lucio. Shanghai playing Soldier, Reaper, Zarya, Lucio, Ana. Um, and from what I can see, from just looking over it quickly and seeing the final 2 minutes, so we're in the lead for most of the time. But it was just chilling around in the middle. Neither of the teams were really hard committing or getting clean fight wins. It was very close. But Shanghai were pushing in overtime. They just squeak out in the end by getting Fitz visor. And the threat of Fleta using Blossom kind of zones Soul away from the point and makes him a little scared. Even though he doesn't use it in the end, the threat of it was enough to kind of disturb Soul and end up Shanghai winning the map. So very close map, pretty good. Not pretty good. Probably the worst played map between the two teams, just from what I'm looking at. But it was very close, 45 to 0.73 to 45.72. Neither team got a checkpoint, and they're just kind of hanging around in the middle. So neither like Seoul were in the lead, like number wise, but they weren't really in the lead because it was very winnable from basically any position. And that's kind of what push ends up being with two very close competitive teams. It's just a lot in the middle for 8 minutes. Moving over to Lijiang Tower ends up being a 2-1 victory for Shanghai. Huyu comes in for Fleta again, and Fate comes in for Void. Nothing out of the ordinary. Gardens is a 100 to 60 victory for Seoul, playing Tracer, Soldier, Winston, Ana, Lucio. Shanghai playing the Genji inside of the Tracer. Fate immediately jumps in and dies right away. Standard thing he's been doing in all series. His jumps have not been clean. But oh shoot. But yeah, so who are you? Almost goes off the map one time with 6 Fate. So regain the point and they win the fight. And they're kind of winning these fights off of ults mostly. And Shanghai get the point back by using their ults after Soul uses their ults just a little bit. Again, they have big value. Who you swap over to Tracer then? And Soul win that last fight off of ults basically. So a lot of good ult control from both of these teams, but Soul ended up having a little bit better. And maybe getting that little bit of an edge from Fate just hinting on the first fight. Moving over to Night Market, the 100 to 99 victory for Shanghai. Same composition with the same variants of the Tracer and the Genji. So we'll get the first cap again, and Fitz is starting to look pretty like stronger than Lip at this point. On this particular map, he ends up getting Visor 60% before Lip. That's a little skewed because it's only been one fight, but and Lip probably died a little earlier, but nonetheless, Prophet's dying, and it's very close. This is in overtime for Seoul. Seoul don't have control, and Shanghai's at 99. Uh, but and a crazy fight. Smurf dies with Primal, becomes back, and Vindame gets Nano Lucio'd, and he goes crazy with it. And it wasn't by accident because there was no one else available, and it was a very hectic, crazy fight. So much going on, and Seoul clutch up. But then Shanghai come back, and they clutch up too. It's a double clutch, and only these two teams could do that. It's like clutch on clutch. So no matter how clutch the Shanghai Dragons are, right, or the Seoul Dynasty are, Shanghai are just that much more clutch, and it's not reasonable. Uh, Crazy. Control Center, not even close. 100-0 for Shanghai. They said we're gonna finish the series now. They're playing Sim, Mei, Ryan, Lucio, Bap. The Sim becomes a Reaper after a fight, and they are just rolling them. Uh, there's nothing else really to say. There was just no. The Seoul Winston comp was struggling to dive anything. Uh, Shanghai are constantly playing aggressively and pushing Seoul into their spawn, forcing resets often. And Seoul are trying to build up ults, and who are uses the Blizzard Summon. You think maybe there's an available time for this blade to do big damage? It doesn't happen though. Where you picks Vindame in the last fight, who's 1% off beat, and Shanghai just kind of pull up and they win. So very very strong control center showing for Shanghai. Yeah, so moving on to summary, very close match as expected. Shanghai just being more clutch than Seoul, even when Seoul are clutching, and they look better when it mattered. They still have moments of question mark emoji, right? And because we're 66, they're like, what are they doing? But they look like the better team. It looks like they should have won Midtown. Both teams looked a little vulnerable on New Queen Street, but teams have been looking a lot on New Queen Street lately, so whatever. Shanghai, until Shanghai are beaten, even if they look a little weaker, maybe, it's still so hard to bet against them because they are so clutch, and it takes a lot to beat them now fully. Thompson played the match getting a little lip. He looked phenomenal in that first two maps, particularly. Didn't look great on Route 66, but neither did anyone in Shanghai. And even though he maybe like right here on Night Market, Fitz gets Visor before him by a lot, but Lip doesn't actually need the Visor. It's a guess that's indicative of how he did in that fight, but that doesn't mean he's getting less value with the Nano Boost. Him using the Nano Boost without Visor is so good for Shanghai, and it makes her rotation that much stronger. It helps them so much, and I really do think more teams should look at doing this. Lip knowing that he can get as much value with the Nano without the Visor, and let the Visor come in after. It's so smart, and it's so talented. And it's a huge difference in these fights. Whenever you see a Nano Visor come out from Fitz, he's not really a threat the next fight. You know that he's not going to be the win con. But Lip can be the win con 2 fights in a row, and that is crazy strong. It is really good. So that's it for APAC. There will be more NA games today. There will be a review for those. I might do a preview quickly, maybe. I don't know. I'll decide. But anyway, have a good one, and deuces.